well today is November the 30th, 2015. We're at the JCC in Dallas. And this is an interview with Bonita Gluckman for the Roots to Boots project as part of the project for the Dallas Historical Society. Bonita, I'd like to start by asking you to tell us what you can about your family history prior to the South African experience. In other words, where did your grandparents come from, as much as you can tell on both sides? And then let's go from there in terms of the family history in South Africa.
Okay, so actually both sets of grandparents were originally from Poland. They were both Polish descents.
Mm-hmm.
But both grandparents were born in South Africa.
Both born, okay, so
great-grandparents were originally from Poland.
And when did they come to South Africa?
I actually don't know the year.
Okay, what years were your grandparents born in South Africa?
Well, both my grandparents have passed, but I'm guessing, I mean, they all would have been in their 90s now.
So they would have been born around the turn of the 20th century.
Right, but they were already in South Africa.
In South Africa. And do you know how long the great-grandparents had been in South Africa prior to the birth of the grandparents?
Well, no, because my mother's great-grandmother, I'm just trying to think if I actually don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Okay, so they left, I would imagine possibly to get away from the Tsar's army.
Yeah, they were a lot earlier none of them were like during the war or anything
Right.
like that.
But people that left at that period of time were escaping things that were going on with the Russian influence.
Right, I mean, they didn't want to leave,
Right.
but their choice, and South Africa was obviously where the boats were going.
Right.
That's where they landed.
So what do you know about the lives that were led by your great-grandparents and your grandparents in South Africa?
Well, I don't know much about my great-grandmother. I know lived with my mother's parents, and she was deaf, and she was a very quiet lady and was around a lot but very withdrawn. My mother's parents they lived in South Africa, and
Do you know what city they lived in?
yeah, they lived in a little town called Benoni.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather was the one who kind of educated all his siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Put one through dental school, one through law school, and the other one, I don't know what his profession was, but he literally, from poverty, they did not come from, they came with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one who actually sacrificed himself and educated all his siblings. But then he actually himself became very successful, and he had a furniture business, and he had a hardware store.
Mm-hmm.
And he did really well, but he was always very involved in the building of synagogues and being part of it, and
This is on your mother's side?
This is my mother's father, my
Mm-hmm.
grandfather. And then my dad's parents, they were lived in a smaller town in Springs. And they were in the opposite business of motor spares and selling cars and garages and stuff like that. So
Now, what large town would these small towns have been close?
So the main city is Johannesburg,
Uh-huh.
which is one of the inland cities. You have your coastal cities. Johannesburg is the big city,
Mm-hmm.
and I was born in. My parents lived in Springs as well, which is about a 45-minute drive. It's a really small town, yet there were 400 Jewish families. So we had a beautiful big synagogue, and it was very, all our neighbors were Jewish, and it was just a really wonderful town to grow up in. And we were lucky. Now there's no Jewish families left there.
How did your parents meet?
My parents met at a wedding, and my dad was there. It was my mother's cousin and my dad's friend. There was some type of crossover that the people that they knew at the wedding, one was for the bride, one was the groom. And my dad came up and gave my mother 5 cents in those days and said, "Call me when you're 18." And
What age difference was there between them?
There's 11 years difference between them. And she was like, "Who?" She did not find it very impressive.
How old was she at that time?
She was about 17, about to turn 18.
Mm-hmm.
And then they crossed, because then he realized how he knew her, then he kind of tracked her down afterwards and took her out. And he was kind of known in Joburg as everyone wanted to date him, and she was very quiet and conservative, and she didn't want anything to do with him, but he pursued her.
So tell me about your dad. At that time, he was in his late 20s at that point, or close to 30.
Uh-huh. No, he was in his late 20s.
Late 20s.
Yeah.
So tell me about his childhood.
So he grew up in Johannesburg. He grew up in Cyrildene. His parents only moved once. Just before my parents got married, they all moved to Springs where they started a business, but he grew up in Johannesburg. And he actually didn't finish school in those days. He just went into his father's business and sold cars and did that. But he was always, whatever he did, he just worked so hard. And he's always been such an honest man, and he made a really good living and a good life and good friends. And yet he wasn't, he never went to college or anything like that. And I actually asked him a few months ago, I said, what would you change or do differently in your life? And he said he would have finished school and got an education. So it was interesting, because I didn't ever think that would have come, that he would have thought that, because to me, he made a success of his life, even though he didn't, really finish school and get educated.
So he met your mother, and what happened when she turned 18?
So then she kind of, she played him for a while, and she dated other guys, and he would try, and he persisted, and eventually he proposed. I don't think they dated very long, maybe a year or not even. And they got married at a small, not a really big wedding, but a nice wedding. And then they both moved to Springs. So.
And when they went to Springs, what did they do in terms of livelihood?
Well, then my dad was in his father's business, which was a spare part business and a scrapyard. But that they sold, and then my parents, and I think my grandfather started it with my father, but he started a business called Steamliner Carpets, and they did any type of flooring. And my dad owned that business for over 40-something years. My mother worked in the business with him, but she was a dancing teacher, so in the afternoon she would teach dancing, and she would have her own studio of women's aerobics. So she taught morning classes, evening classes, and did dancing in the afternoon, and ran my dad's business. So she was
very busy.
A very busy lady. Yeah.
And at what point did they start having children?
My mum was actually 20 or 21, and she had a really bad miscarriage. She was pretty far in her pregnancy. She was like 6 months pregnant, so she had a miss. And then shortly after that, she fell pregnant with my older brother, and then I've got a middle brother, and then me. So there's 2 boys and me.
And you lived in this small town?
We grew up here in this small town.
Tell me more about the town.
Well, like I said, very small town, nothing to do, no very big buildings, nothing major going on, but just a really good community. Your neighbors and everyone was just, it had a downside where you grew up with my parents or everyone going, careful, what's everybody saying? Because everyone knew everyone, so you got that small town, everyone knows your business. But it was such a sense of community and family, and to this day I'm still friends with all the friends that I grew up with, so it was wonderful because you were all in walking distance. Jewish holidays were always special because you went to shul and everyone had their same seats, and it was just I wouldn't change it yet. I think growing up we always wanted to be in the big city. You know, as kids you kind of always thought there was more going on there. But my parents, what we did is we would go to like the Jewish camps at the end of the year, which were in Cape Town. You would go on the train, and that's how we kind of branched out and met friends from Johannesburg and other cities, and then we kept in contact. So you always did kind of spread your wings a little bit. My brothers actually, when they were in, which is equivalent to about 10th grade here, they would travel by train and actually go to school in Johannesburg, but I didn't. I stayed and finished school in the small town.
And was it a Jewish school? Or
it wasn't a Jewish school. A lot of the Jewish kids would actually bus to a school which was like 45 minutes, which was an all just a Jewish school, but it was so small. There were maybe 15 kids in each grade, and my parents didn't want me to be that, and I'm grateful they didn't, because I was in a big school with, you know, it was an all-girls high school, but I had great opportunities of what I could do there where I couldn't do it at the other school. And I still always socialized with them. I never lost my friends, so I kind of had the best of both worlds.
So were there any Jewish clubs, social clubs?
There was, and so like on the weekends there was, and tennis, and there was, they had a place where we would go for our Hebrew lessons, and where the teachers were. It was very, you know, just all of that was available. There was even a Jewish nursery school where we all went to. So it was really, for a small town, like I say, it was to have 400 families, that's a lot of families.
Was there an ability to get kosher food if you wanted, kosher meat?
No, that you'd have to go to the big cities. I mean, it was available, just not to what it was in the big city, if you were in Johannesburg.
So you finished school there, and after high school, what did you do?
I went to beauty school, and I did 3 years of beauty school.
And where did you do that?
In Johannesburg. So when I finished school, then I moved into an apartment in Johannesburg, because there was nothing to do in Springs. And so I did that.
And what were you learning to do, hair or nails? Or
no, all facials, all that, massage, nails, feet.
And what was your social life there?
It was good. I'd stayed in contact with the friends that I'd grown up with, but then I started to meet. It was kind of like immigrating when you went to Johannesburg, because just knowing your way around and meeting people, it was a whole new place. It was like, felt like you were in a different country. Well, for me, it was big. But I had a really good cousin who had lived in Natal, which is in Durban, which is on a coastal town, and she moved up at the same time, so we lived together. So it was kind of like we started it together, so it was really nice.
And so at what point did you meet your husband?
So when I actually finished beauty school and went to my mother's sister had a beauty place, and I went to go work for her, and I did not enjoy doing it at all. It just was nothing that I thought I would enjoy. And I actually went into retail clothing and got hired by these people who had me open up a lot of stores throughout South Africa. So I had a complete different change of career. And I was doing that, and my mother wanted to come visit my brother who had immigrated to Dallas. And she didn't want to fly by herself. She said, would I fly with her? So I said, okay, I'll fly with you. And we flew into Dallas. And I'd been once or twice by myself, so it wasn't like I was excited. There's not that much to do in Dallas. And my sister-in-law's brother was doing business with my husband, Gary. And he said, sister-in-law's sister's here from South Africa, can I set you up? And he set us up on a blind date. So I was just visiting, and he called me up, and we had a lot of people in common that we knew, yet we'd never met in South Africa. So our paths had crossed, yet we had never, I knew his name, he knew my name, and then we had so many people in common that we knew, yet we had never known. So it was really easy, obviously, to talk to him, and we went out with quite a few people the first night, and then he called me back the next night, and we went out, and then the entire time, which was about a month that I was visiting, I almost went out every night. And then when we got on the plane to go home, I realized I'm crying. My mother, why are you crying? I said, I don't know, I think I really like him.
How long ago was this?
So this was, we've been married 20 years, so this was 22 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I got back to South Africa, and he sent me this huge thing of roses and said, you know, please will you come back? But I was really independent there. I'd bought my own house, I had my own car, I had a really successful position in this company.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really huge decision, yet having had met him, it was an easy decision. And I was really always extremely close to my parents. So I was someone who people would say she would never leave her parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of didn't almost think of the huge choice that I was making, that I was going to live on the other side of the world and give up everything. But it just felt right. And about 3 months later, I came back, or maybe 4 months later. And about 6 or 7 months after that, we got engaged, and we were engaged for a year, and we got married. So my father really met Gary just before our wedding, because we got married in South Africa. We went back there. So he came 5 days before the wedding, and that's when my father met him. My mother came back, or she'd met him, and then she came back for our engagement party and visit.
Wow.
And that's how I got to Dallas. So
And so,
crazy.
when you got to Dallas, when you finally arrived here and you were a married person, how did you find the integration process into this community? What was it like for you?
There were really easy parts, and then there was really lonely parts. You know, you really come, and I was young, so, you know, it's where do you fit in the community? I remember we kind of were part of Ohev Shalom, and the woman called me to come bake Hamantaschen with them. And I remember feeling that was such a great, I really felt like they just made me feel comfortable, and I was like, well, this is good. But then other times you really felt very isolated. It was pretty hard. But what happened is that kind of at the same time as I came, there were a few other South Africans who were my age. So we actually had a very strong group of some were newly engaged or dating or getting married. We were all kind of at the same stages of our lives. And so we had a really good support group in that. So I didn't really feel support from the community, but I didn't need it as much at that age, because we had all these, we were mainly South Africans, and we were all, you know, we would go out for dinner, go to movies, or, you know, if I needed someone to call, I had this great group of friends, and we're still friends today. So I was really fortunate for that.
And in the years, you said it's been 20-some years now.
I've been married 20 years in January.
20 years in January.
Yeah.
And how have you found life in Dallas over those 20 years?
I think it's been amazing. I mean, once you have kids, obviously your life changes where they go to school and then you meet other people. So we met then people out of the other circle that we had originally. We've met really good friends who become like family. When you're not living in the place you were born, I think you don't have the family you had back home. So friends become family. And we've been really fortunate, and our kids have been fortunate that we've got a great group of, we call them now family.
And where are your children? How old are your children?
So I have my oldest son will be 18 in July. And then my youngest son will be 13 in January.
And where have they been in school?
So they were both at Levine Academy. Well, actually, my older one, we did Beth Torah, Mommy and Me. And then we went to Levine Academy. And then the little one was there. My older one left, he finished 8th grade. And then he went to Yavna for a year. And then he went to Parish. Where my younger one had already left 5th grade at Levine, and he went to Parish, and they both at Parish now. So we made really close friends over the years at Levine, and they did. and I think they made friends that they'll always have. But it just they needed a change, and they're really happy where they are.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, have you personally gotten involved in any Jewish organizations in the
Well,
city?
we're members at Chabad of Plano,
Mm-hmm.
and I do like annually. I do their fundraising. They have a big evening of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing that now for I think 15 years or 16
Mhm.
years. That's my big thing. I do with them every year, and then whenever they need any other functions, I'm kind of involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not involved in other Jewish, fundraisers and organizations. I think with having kids, you get involved in the schools, so I
Mhm.
do that a lot. And a lot of my personal time is I take care of my mom who's really ill, so
Wow.
she's kind of a big chunk of my free time. So then the rest is I give to the schools, and then like this Chabad things and every year thing, and then whenever they need, I would love to do more, but I do as much as I can. at
So
the
when did
moment.
your mother come here?
So my parents arrived here 9 years ago.
Mhm.
They finally immigrated. My mother always wanted to come. My dad didn't want to come. And the funny thing is, he's had it better since he's here than she has. So, you never know what it's going to turn out to be. But she would come and visit and stay for 3 months every year, and just was always her dream to live here with us
Mhm.
and be part of our lives. And from the time she came, she was really ill. So
Oh,
she,
I'm so sorry.
yeah,
Do they live near you?
they live like 2 minutes away from me. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
So, if you had to give your children some advice or leave a verbal legacy as to what's important for you that you would like them to know about, what would you say?
Well, I think what's important is that they always know, like mine and I think it's easier because Gary and I are both from South Africa, that they know our roots of how South Africa was, and that will always be a part of us. And sometimes it makes us different, and sometimes it's been hard for them. They're like, it's not American, and we say, well, we're not American. And I always want them to have that strong culture of, it was different growing up in South Africa to what it is in America, and we want them to still know where we came from. But I do think that we gave them a great gift of coming here and having a life and education and just the freedom here, because South Africa doesn't have that anymore.
Is there anything you miss about not being in South Africa?
I think I miss a lot, but it's not the same either. I think people who live when I go back and visit, or people who live there now, life's not like it was when we grew up. So I miss the life I had, growing up, where you just, I felt like, not that you had more freedom, but it just was a different culture. It wasn't that everyone worked these crazy hours, 5 o'clock everybody was at home, and kids went to school till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I just think the schedule here is crazy, but I think it's like that everywhere, and that's the only difference that I think I would like to rather have had that lifestyle. They seem to enjoy life a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But we try, my husband works hard, but he has his own business, so he never misses anything with the kids, and we try to have weekends together and that. But I still think here it's work, and crazy what the schedules of the kids. My kids play football, they get home at 8 o'clock at night sometimes. So I do miss that part, but I think it's changed.
Mhm.
But I'm happy to be in Dallas.
Well, we're so happy that you spent the time with us today and shared your story.
Thank you.
I think it'd be important for your children to have access to this video and for the community to have access to your story.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for the time that you spent with me today.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.